morning or something. A little quick video today. Come here to talk about things, and often talk about Bitcoin and things like that, and marketing and whatnot. Today, I'm going to talk about Bitcoin, but not necessarily about specific trading per se on the day or on the price action chart of the moment. I'm going to talk about the recent interview by Max Keiser on the Saylor channel. In case you're not familiar with that guy, he's got a small little channel, about like 10,000 viewers. I assume it will continue to grow and maybe even start to grow quite rapidly, especially because he keeps bringing on bigger and bigger guests. And just yesterday, he posted an interview that he did with Max Keiser, the original Bitcoin Maxi, as they call him, right? Which he explained in that interview actually where he thinks that phrase came from, which was when he was speaking with Vitalik back in around 2012, and Vitalik was explaining Ethereum to him, and he said to Vitalik Buterin that it sounds like basically just another centralized form of currency. And Vitalik said, you're just a Bitcoin Maxi, which he said to Max Keiser, at least allegedly. But he also said that it could just be from years of storytelling that, that the facts may not be entirely that, but still interesting little anecdote for the annals of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. So if you ever wondered where the term Bitcoin Maxi came from, at least you now have a story from a person to whom it is very often ascribed, saying that, it was probably from that conversation, but it was actually Vitalik Buterin who said it about Max Keiser. And that's how the phrase was born. Anyway, interesting side note. What he did talk about during that interview at great length was, among other things, El Salvador, the country in which he resides since some time. And he's obviously a big fan of President Bukele, who was a relatively young president of a country that was once viewed as a very dangerous place to live, one of the most dangerous countries in the world. And ever since Bukele became president and became orange-pilled, as they call it in the Bitcoin community, and being orange-pilled basically means that he has, taken the Bitcoin medicine, so to speak, and he has read the white paper and seen the light of Satoshi Nakamoto's invention, and has since become a proponent of Bitcoin, so much so that obviously El Salvador has become, kind of the first nation where Bitcoin is accepted everywhere, in every store. You could already pay for it and pay with it in other countries for all kinds of different bills and whatever. But now you can, literally, if you go to a shop in El Salvador, in addition to their local currency and or the dollar, they also accept Bitcoin. And Max obviously is a big proponent of that and an advisor about this. And so obviously he's very excited to talk about El Salvador being basically the new shining city on a hill, which is what they used to call America, which is a reference to Jerusalem from the Bible, in the old Bible days, the shining city on the hill. And Reagan famously once said, he wanted to make America the new shining city on the hill once again, kind of thing. And by the way, many presidents have said this kind of thing. There was a famous speech back in the day when Reagan said it. So what did he talk about? Well, among other things, he also talked about Entropy. Wait, what? Yes, Max Keiser, who is a Bitcoin investor, in the sense that he has bought many Bitcoins a long time ago when they were very cheap, and as far as we know, still holds a lot of them, and probably still buys more. Who knows? But he was talking about Bitcoin, and he was saying that Bitcoin Entropy has already begun, basically. And you'll notice when he said that, if you watch the interview, he didn't exactly mention what that means. He didn't exactly mention how you could see that measurably. He just said it in a passing phrase, which a lot of people do about a lot of things. They just say, "Oh yeah, this thing happened, that thing happened, this is happening," but they don't actually explain what they mean, especially when they're using a phrase or a word that most people don't even know what it is. If I ask the average person what is entropy, they don't. Most people won't have any clue, right? They probably slept through that part of science class, or they slept through that part of math class, or they slept through the part of the movie they were watching when somebody explained it to them. People just generally don't know what entropy is. And there's a reason for that. First of all, it's a relatively modern concept. It's not thousands of years old in terms of being part of human discourse. It's a relatively modern concept. And it's fairly complicated, partly because even though there's effectively one good way to express it, there are actually a number of ways to kind of express it that are appropriate for the different things we're talking about. So entropy in space, in the physical universe, is very different than digital entropy, which is very different than mathematical entropy for things like calculating whether or not an asset that is traded digitally, for the most part, right, is moving in trend or in a random walk. So there are different ways to calculate or to express the definition of entropy, even if the calculations of it are very similar. So nevertheless, you mentioned Bitcoin is an entropy and will continue to be. Well, what is entropy? Entropy is the diffusion or the dispersion. You see, there's a difference in definitions. The diffusion or the dispersion of energy within a space. Well, that space can be physical, or it can be digital, or it can be an abstract concept. It can be imaginary, right? So, the diffusion of energy within space. Well, okay. If Bitcoin was actually being diffused and dispersed within a space, then you know what would happen to it? It wouldn't all be centralized in the hands of very few holders. Now you can say, well, 15 years ago there were zero Bitcoin, Bitcoin holders. 16 years ago there were zero Bitcoin holders because the protocol didn't exist. And ever since Satoshi launched the network and created the first Bitcoin wallet, now there's more than 400, 500 million crypto wallets, of which at least a couple hundred million are Bitcoin, hold some Bitcoin, or they're Bitcoin wallets, whether they hold any or not. Okay, well, if there's a couple hundred million Bitcoin wallets, but only 13,000 people have 91% of all that Bitcoin, and 10 years ago, there were 10 million Bitcoin wallets, and maybe 5 million of them held 91% of the mined Bitcoin at the time. There's no question that whenever there's something that has monetary value comes along, something new, right, power and money will concentrate towards that thing and wrest control of it one way or the other, using power and money, right? Fame, fortune, and glory. Those are the three easy things. Well, fame and glory, you can kind of say. Fame, fortune, and power. Those are the three easy things that can be used to control entire populations, and it's no different when you have a new asset class. So money and power can concentrate the wealth, and that is exactly what's happened with Bitcoin. So while there is entropy on every asset being traded, in the sense of trading entropy, right? There's a diffusion and dispersion of energy of that asset on the charts of the exchanges that are trading it. Yes, that there is. There really is no entropy yet in the Bitcoin space. It is still very much being dispersed and immediately captured, by and large, at the hands of the whales who already own the vast majority of it. Right? It was just a little chart posted yesterday on, I think I saw it on LinkedIn, and then I reposted it on Discord, and maybe I saw it on Twitter. I don't remember. Anyway, it basically showed that the top 13 wallets have something like 28% of all the Bitcoin. 13 wallets, 13 organizations. What it is, like Satoshi has 1.1 million, Binance has like 369,000. The United States has like 300,000. The U.S. government, meaning, and then a whole bunch of huge other companies. Kraken, Michael Saylor's company, MicroStrategy, and and on and on. There were like 13 different companies. China has almost a couple 100,000. I think like 196,000. And then this is information as of like a week ago, like on the 6th of September. Okay, and what it demonstrated is that just the 13 wallets have 28% of all the Bitcoin already in their hands. And when you consider the remaining 6%, even less than 6%, because by the way, there aren't 19.7 million Bitcoin mined now. Now it's like 19.8 million have been mined. Because people forget, time passes, right? It was 19.7 at the Bitcoin halving. Now it's been 180 days since the all-time high and about 150 days since the halving. So in that 150 days, at a rate of about 450 a day, we're talking, a good number. A good number have already been mined, so it's now over 19.8 million. Anyway, it's going to take another 116 years to finish mining that last 1.2 million, right? 1.3 million, whatever, 1.2. And most of that will get mined within the next 10 years, and there'll be less than, less than 1% or whatever to be mined. At that point, I think it'll be like, whatever, it's already the vast majority is mined, right? Whatever's left at that point in the next 10 years. After that, the remaining 104 years or so are just going to be mining far less than people are typically losing, frankly, which is unbelievable in that 2024 that people are still losing Bitcoin, but it does happen. It definitely does. And it's understandable that some will get lost, but we're seeing far greater rates getting lost than one would assume would happen. But so anyway, the point is Max Keiser was talking about entropy and saying that Bitcoin is an entropy, to which I say, well, technically speaking, you can always say everything that exists from the time it's created, from the time it's invented, from the time it's born, from the time it exists until the time it ceases to exist is by definition in entropy. But at what stage? Is it in the stage of entropy where it's still not yet diffusing, or it's still concentrating? So it's not technically an entropy yet. You could say, well, it's a long process. It includes the concentration and then the diffusion. Okay, but then it's not really in entropy until it starts to diffuse. So I just thought that was a very interesting point he was making, which I don't agree with, but it's still his point of view. And the reason I don't agree is because, again, when you look at the fact that, so much is controlled by so few, that means that it's not decentralized at all. It's not diffusing at all into the space, right? It's just being more and more concentrated over time. So we'll see how diffused it becomes and whether or not it actually becomes a diffused asset. For now, it's not. It used to be decentralized a lot more than it is. And then it got re-centralized by the people who wanted to own it. And then Michael Saylor gave a speech, or it was published yesterday, where he gave another one of these speeches about everything to do with economics, where he presented the case for Bitcoin once again and showed how Bitcoin is basically the new energy and is basically the future of energy. And all those things are, yeah. So yeah, I believe that, Bitcoin needs to have strong supporters. And the upside of this kind of presentation he gave helps to demonstrate the value proposition that is Bitcoin beyond just the monetary value, right? Because you get to demonstrate with energy. Hey, buddy, how you doing? Because Bitcoin does demonstrate. Bitcoin does demonstrate very clearly which Bitcoin has created. And yes, you can compare it to stocks, you can compare it to bonds, you can compare it to commodities, you can compare it to whatever you want, right? Currencies. Is it better than gold or oil? Sure. Is it the best performing asset on the market of all time? Yes. No. Those MicroStrategy show you that actually he's had better returns than Bitcoin in the last 4 years since they started investing in Bitcoin? Yes. But that's only because the thing that he has is a stock whose value was quite low relatively to what it is now, and suddenly went up when they started to invest in Bitcoin. So basically what he's saying is, my company's value went up because we invested in Bitcoin. So it's not his company's innovations that are making his company more valuable, right? It's definitely not that. It's the fact that he holds Bitcoin that makes his company more valuable. Which again, that's perfectly fine. But it doesn't mean that MicroStrategy is a company that is going to perform better than Bitcoin for the next 15 years, right? Bitcoin, unless he manages to do something with it beyond what Bitcoin does, once it has achieved a certain amount of returns, well, either you innovate or you don't. And I'm not trashing his company at all. I mean, they've frankly done fantastically well, even though he would tell you had a relatively small company that had only about $500 million on hand back when he started to invest in Bitcoin, to which I would say, well, $500 million is not bad for a small software company, right, that most people have never even heard of. Now, sure, it's not the be-all and end-all of big companies by any means. It's, barely on the scale. But he certainly has taken what was a once relatively small company and turned it into a rather prodigious proponent of Bitcoin protocol. And it has paid off ridiculously well for him. So they've invested some billions of dollars in return, in investment money into Bitcoin. And their returns have been insanely high. Their stock price has gone up 3 times as much as the returns on Bitcoin. Yeah. So ever since they started to put Bitcoin on the ledgers over at MicroStrategy, the returns of MicroStrategy stock have gone up like 950% since then. Which is, the returns on Bitcoin have been like almost 12 billion% from the first day they started being traded 15 years ago or whatever, 14 years ago on markets around 2010. Right? So what does that mean? Going to always be worth used by MicroStrategy, or to drastically change how MicroStrategy does business in other ways? Like, is it possible that MicroStrategy does something to vastly improve its value more significantly than Bitcoin? Well, sure, they could use that energy, which is, Bitcoin, to develop other technologies, which could, in theory, make the world even better. Like, if Bitcoin is, as he calls it, the first perfect money, which nothing is perfect, right? The only perfect thing you can count on in life is that the universe isn't perfect. Imperfections are kind of a perfection, if you want to call that. So yeah, he could, in theory, I guess, have engineers working for him, or maybe he'll come up with $1 billion ideas himself to make the next perfect money, or to make something else that will be better for humanity, right? That's possible, certainly not impossible. The question is, are they likely to do it? Is it likely to be as successful? How will it be able to catch up when 15 years have already gone by and Bitcoin has already been able to demonstrate over the past 15 years that it will probably survive the next 15 years and keep growing, right? At a phenomenal pace, even if it's not 12 billion% again, right? Well, those are all open questions, and it doesn't really matter in one sense, like whether or not he even does it, because like, what does it matter at all? To be honest, it doesn't, right? It's just like chewing cud, if you will, right? Keep chewing the same grass over and over again if you're a cow, right? It's just mental gymnastics. For what purpose, right? The point is, MicroStrategy has done incredibly well by investing in Bitcoin because the future of value transactions. Bitcoin is an energy play in that way. In that way, he's not wrong about it, right? Expression he uses about Bitcoin says, the value proposition is get rich or get wealthy or something like that. Like, depending on how much you buy, right? If you have stocks, commodities, whatever, if you want to be wealthy, basically get Bitcoin, right? Which is, there's an argument to that. People who became wealthy, thanks to Bitcoin, believe to become wealthy through some other means if Bitcoin had not existed, or if they didn't know about it. Why? Because, of course, the people who are actually going to figure out a way to do it. Wealth inherit, not a give, who actually would have been wealthy if Bitcoin didn't exist. But it does imply that a significant number of them would have been wealthy whether or not there was a Bitcoin. How do we know this? Well, Bitcoin didn't exist till 15 years ago, and lots of people were wealthy already then. And lots of people were being asked it every day and every year back then too. So yes, maybe people got exponentially more rich or wealthier because of Bitcoin. And maybe some more people are wealthier now than would have been if there was no Bitcoin. But I would still argue that the vast majority of the people who are wealthy in the last 15 years, thanks to Bitcoin, would have become wealthy regardless of whether or not Bitcoin existed. They would have just found another way to do it. Anyway, so that's not to diss anybody who has become wealthy in the last 15 years thanks to Bitcoin. No, absolutely not. Congratulations to them. I think that's amazing and that's awesome. I'm just saying those people have even more potential than I think is given to them. Or they had more potential to do that than is granted to them in the sense of, oh, well, they just got lucky. No, they didn't just get lucky, right? Maybe they were just visionary and they bought an asset that was extremely speculative and they believed in it enough that they just held on to it. That's not getting lucky. Holding on to something that everybody else says is stupid, and you just keep holding on to it, no matter what, to the point where all of a sudden you wake up one day and it's not from 0 to 1 billion. It's been climbing and climbing and climbing there. But you wake up one day and your assets are over $1 billion, as opposed to the hundreds of millions of dollars that they were before, as opposed to the tens of millions and the millions before that. And the hundreds of thousands and the tens of thousands and the nothing that it was when you first bought it. Right? So there was a long climb to get for many people. It didn't just happen overnight. But these days, the people who are getting into Bitcoin in significant quantities are only rich people, right? Or governments or huge banks or huge financial institutions or big companies. There's no individual can just drop $1 million or more to just buy, 15 Bitcoin or 20 Bitcoin or whatever. Right? That's not a thing. Most people don't have $1 million to spend on some asset that they is extremely risky, let alone billions, right? Because if they did, they'd be wealthy. They wouldn't be having this conversation about how do people become wealthy with Bitcoin. You don't get wealthy with Bitcoin overnight. You get wealth with Bitcoin by understanding its value, first of all. So he has this little kind of like, not chart, but like list of like what people go through until they become like, all in Bitcoin maxis. And at first it's like, people who just are naysayers and like, this thing is a ridiculous con, you should avoid it. They're complete 100% anti Bitcoin. They just think it's, garbage and, nothing good can come of it. And then if you give them an hour to learn about it, suddenly they're a skeptic. So like, I don't think this is real, but okay, maybe, possibly, if I see evidence. And you give them another 100 hours and they become like traders, right? Because they see, oh, okay, you could do things with this and you can trade it. You can use it to barter, or barter. You can use it to buy things and sell things. I can use it to trade on exchanges. I can use it to make money. I can use it to take profits. And then that's when he started to get into the whole concept of volatility and companies hating volatility and liking, things to be calm and predictable. And he said Bitcoin teaches people to love volatility. Well, I would say it's not just Bitcoin that teaches people to love volatility. If you're a smart trader and you work at an HFT firm, you know that volatility is the name of the game, which is what we teach at Alpha Trading. It's all about volatility. It's based on volatility and entropy and probability and statistics. That's why we call the acronym the VEPS, right? But the first letter of that is V for volatility. Well, without the volatility as the basis, all that school of trading wouldn't even exist, right? And that all came from the Black-Scholes formula that they invented for options traders. So yes, a lot of companies do hate volatility because those companies aren't traders. Those companies are just making widgets and selling them and trying to increase shareholder value by however many widgets they sell. And so he said, okay, so you had 100 hours from the time somebody, after they've become a skeptic, give them another 100 hours, or, give them another 99 hours from that. So it'd be T plus 100 from the time they originally started. And suddenly, so after they become traders, then you give them 1,000 hours and they become investors. It doesn't matter what the number is, 1,000, 500, 10,000. But after people become traders, eventually they become investors, to which I say it really depends on a person's context, right? Some people have time to be investors for the long time. Some people don't have that time. But yes, eventually you become a bigger picture, higher mindset. In my case, since I was one of the original people in this thing way back in the day, 2009, like early, late 2008, I was already reading about it. 2009, in January, everybody had miners running. And then eventually I stopped because stupid, because robbery, actually. But the most people do become investors after they get excited about trading it. That's true. But most people get into retail investing before they get into trading. That's also true. So it's not necessarily true that people go from being, completely anti to skeptic to trader then investor. It can easily be from completely anti to skeptic to investor and then trader. And then eventually, right, the thing that you had after investor is you put another, whatever it is, year on that, and then you become a Bitcoin maxi. Okay. So, 10,000 hours or whatever, become a Bitcoin maxi. Okay. So maybe, but I would again argue there will never be just one currency. Okay. There's millions of them now, and they're not all going to disappear. And when Max Keiser or Michael Saylor say there's just going to be one cryptocurrency, to me, that sounds, they obviously have a self-interest in saying that because they're both huge Bitcoin whales. So they don't want competition from other assets eating up the market share of Bitcoin. But my answer to that is the same it's always been. Competition is good for the marketplace. If all there was one asset, it wouldn't have nearly as much volatility. It wouldn't be nearly as desirable to people, right? It's because it's competing against all these other assets and continues to crush them that people want it so much, right? You got all these other projects run by teams of people. None of them are doing as good of a job as an asset that's not run by any one person. That shows you the power of open source decentralization. And that doesn't always work that way, right? Look, I've created a bunch of cryptocurrencies. They're not owned by anyone. I don't even own any of the tokens. Some of them I own about 5% of the tokens, just like Satoshi owned about 5% of the, owns about 5% of the token. But most of them I don't own any. And there's no team. You probably never heard of most of them. Maybe one or two of them or a few of them you have, but maybe more than a few. But but the point is I made a bunch of completely decentralized cryptocurrencies that there is no team. There is no centralized figure. I don't control anything about it at all. It's out in the wild. It exists. People trade it. People hold it. People do whatever they want with it. It runs on a protocol. They each have their own protocol. They're each different use case, et cetera, et cetera. I got nothing to do with it, right? All I did was build it. Right? I created it. I invented it, but I don't control it in any way. Like I don't even have any tokens of them, right? Not because I don't believe in them, but because specifically I want to not affect the inventions that I made in a way that centralized teams negatively impact the projects that they are controlling in the crypto space. It's not, by the way, this doesn't apply necessarily to other things, right? Not everything can be decentralized in this way. If you make medical devices, you don't want that to be decentralized to the point where nobody is responsible for anything. There needs to be trust inherently in the device, and you can't get that trust in a medical device the same way you can get trust in a mathematical protocol. A mathematical protocol, you can check it, you can verify it, right? A medical device, if you're not a doctor or a scientist, how can you verify it? How can you determine whether or not it's good if you don't know the science or the math? that's required to know how to build it. So that is why that's why you need centralized teams to do certain centralized things. Verification process, it's hard to trust those things. Those things are things that you put people's lives into, essentially. Right? The safety of someone's life could be heavily dependent on a medical device, or completely dependent on a medical device. You don't want that there's no one to call if something goes wrong. Like, yes, you could have a group of makers invent a project together that could turn into a medical device, and they could stay either pseudonymous or completely anonymous, and it might be a very useful invention. But if there isn't some third party, at least, if not somebody from the team itself, willing to say, okay, if something goes wrong, here's who you call for support, right? Like Michael, this brings me back to the point about Michael Saylor's presentation. He was saying that Bitcoin has, among other things, Bitcoin has the greatest adoption rate, the greatest economic value, the greatest tech support. I'm thinking, wait a minute. Bitcoin doesn't have tech support. Okay. Bitcoin doesn't have a central office. Bitcoin has a lot of adopters who are proponents of Bitcoin and who make technologies related to it, like people who make wallets that support Bitcoin. And you can call their tech support to ask them about their wallet. But if you call them and ask them about somebody else's wallet that supports Bitcoin, they're going to tell you, sorry, we don't support that wallet. We didn't make that wallet, even though it's a Bitcoin wallet. We don't know how they built it. It's not our code. We don't have access to that code. We can't help you. You're SOL. And they don't mean Solana. Right? So Bitcoin doesn't have tech support. Bitcoin has great tech. Bitcoin has a great core of coders who maintain its core code, but they're all from different places around the world, and they all have very different views of the world. They all have very different agenda. They're not all the same people at all, right? They have very different agenda about what they would like, and that's one of the reasons that Bitcoin as a proof of work continues to work very nicely, because of the different interests that the people have. Because of the different interests people have, that guarantees the security of the network as long as there are nodes running the network. The reason for that is the people running the network are securing their own interests within an asset that is increasingly popular over time, right? That asset has been growing in network security over 15 years because there's been more nodes added to the network. Does that mean that it will always stay that way? That there can never be another asset that suddenly has more nodes running it? Obviously not. There could definitely be more nodes running other assets that can outpace Bitcoin, and there can definitely be a huge fall off in the number of nodes running Bitcoin. Why would such a fall off occur on Bitcoin? Well, if there was no financial incentive to it, if people didn't see a financial value to having Bitcoin, or if they didn't see another value to having Bitcoin, like the ability to transfer values that aren't necessarily financial, then they would seek other solutions. For example, if you could do, and you can, if you could do real estate transfers of deeds and all that kind of stuff, titles on other blockchains, And there are other blockchains built specifically for that. In addition to the fact that you can technically use Bitcoin for that, but there are some that are specifically designed for that. Then those other blockchains could surpass Bitcoin in that niche. And if they found other general purpose uses, they could also potentially grow to be bigger than Bitcoin over time. Right? Competition is not going to just stop because, oh, wow, Bitcoin is amazing. Yeah, Bitcoin's amazing. A lot of things are amazing. Lamborghinis are amazing cars for certain things. Porsches are amazing for certain things. BMWs are amazing for certain things. Maseratis are amazing for certain things. Ford trucks can be amazing for certain things. Right? Doesn't matter. Even what's that electric car company? You've heard about it? By Elon Musk. He made a company called Satellite. No, I'm kidding. Tesla by Elon Musk. All right, so Tesla, they also make things that some people say are amazing, that many people say are amazing. Right? They're regular electric car models. Kind of amazing, but also not. If you want to be a critic, you can point out the fact that the things required to make batteries are really bad for the environment, and the process of doing it is bad for the environment and requires child labor, which is inhumane, or certainly violates children's rights to not have to be put into dangerous working conditions. All right, so this guy who's saving planet Earth, he's not. He's just a good marketer. Is exploiting children, poor children who don't have a choice. You want money to be able to feed your family? Crawl into that hole and dig out this poisonous stuff with your bare hands. Go ahead, do it. So, you can criticize anything, right? Practically. But that's not to say that Bitcoin is all bad. And in fact, obviously, I'm a proponent of it. I think Bitcoin is actually amazing. That's why I got into it very early. Bitcoin is, in fact, an incredible invention. And I'm not going to dwell too long on that other than to say, yes, it is economic energy, but it's more than that to me. And yes, it's diffused from 0 points. There's more than 0 people that own it, and there's more than one person that owns it. But the concentration has become more concentrated as opposed to less concentrated. So it isn't yet diffusing entropically. You could say, well, it began diffusing entropically once a second account was made. And then now it's just, starting to concentrate a bit more because big whales own most of it again. Again, I would argue that since the last 4 or 5 years, since the whales have been taking over all the big accounts, it has become completely concentrated. And it needs to diffuse again. It needs to go entropic again. Until it does, it's a nice currency to trade. It's a nice asset to hold as an investor. It's a useful tool for many things you can do, like transfer values. It's all these wonderful things, immutable, uncensorable, et cetera, but it's not decentralized. Not by any stretch of the imagination. Yeah, okay. Oh, well, yeah, 13,000 people is a lot of people. Yeah, but 13,000 people own, out of hundreds of millions that have some, 13,000 people own more than 90% of it. That's not decentralized. Right? That's literally the power in the hands of a few. That's the kind of swamp that everybody in the pre-crypto world was complaining about regarding the fiat world, about traditional finance, and that they complain about still to this day about politics, right? People are saying, oh, politics is a quagmire, it's a political swamp, and blah, blah, blah. The elites, right? Well, what do you think 13,000 people out of 200 million is if those 13,000 control 91%? They're the elite. And I'm not against the elite existing. I'm just saying recognize the fact that that is what it is. And if you want, it goes against the ethos of Bitcoin. In that sense, yeah, you could set him against that because Bitcoin was created not to have that. It was created to find a way around that for most people. But as always, money will take over, right? And the only way to avoid that is to create a protocol that doesn't allow that. And as I've been telling you since the middle of summer, I've been working on creating new coins that have different protocols that don't allow that. And that effectively do not allow the accumulation of the token in massive quantities by any significant party, by any one party, even if they have multiple wallets and they try to hide it. How do you do that? Well, technology, my friends. That's how we do that. And hopefully I'll have more to say on that soon. But for now, that's going to do it. If you found this at all interesting, let me know. I'd like to hear what your thoughts are. Do you think Bitcoin is too concentrated? Do you think Bitcoin is entropic? Do you think Bitcoin is more than just an energy play? Do you think Michael Saylor is 100% right and whatever he doesn't say about it isn't the case? Like, do you think he's like some prophet? To me, he's just a great cheerleader, but he certainly wasn't the first, and he certainly won't be the last. But good for him, man. Success to Michael Saylor. I'd love to speak with that guy and talk with him about Bitcoin, and chew the fat, as it were. But he certainly speaks his mind very well and makes his case very well for Bitcoin. Anyway, if you want to learn how to trade volatility, go to the Alpha Trading Discord. That, again, is at alphatradinghq.com/Discord. And there you can pick up free volatility tools. Just request your free access in the request support channel. And you'll get free access to the Volatility Starter Pack and all the info you need to learn how to trade with those tools. And you get access to the live streams, and you get access to traders using those tools every day to trade. And we do live streams Monday through Friday starting at 9 a.m. U.S. Eastern Time. So you can get some pre-traditional market action information before the bell rings. And then we run the live stream for about an hour after the bell rings. So, you get some lead time on the market open. You get some lead time, crypto's 24/7. So you get some good info on daily projections. If you know how to listen, you get some really good insights into what is probably going to happen on any given day. And you can see, once again, yesterday, that exactly what was said is what happened, right? Like, what did the price action, for example, on Bitcoin do? Yeah, yesterday, the price action on Bitcoin went exactly up to the center of the monthly range, and then proceeded to come back down, and now it is exactly back at where it was towards the end, like in the last 4 hours, at the beginning of the last 4 hours on Monday, before it rose up to just under the bottom of the central monthly range, and then spent the whole day yesterday just going back and forth from near the top of the monthly range down to near the bottom of it, and then back up to the, and back down to the weekly range, and the top of the weekly range, and just back and forth. So if you want to learn how to trade volatility, like I said, just come into the Alpha Trading Discord, and you'll see the probabilities and statistics of volatility and entropy, and that's why we trade those things. So if you want to learn a better way to trade, there you go. There you have it. See you guys later. Have a good one. Cheers.